Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're excited to have our very own senior application consultants, Jenny Hollingsworth and John Grant, and they're going to be presenting on manufacturing utilizing warehouse functionality. And as a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we will post it to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And we encourage you to ask questions during our presentation, so please feel free to type them into the questions box. And as we are going through the presentation, we will address those questions for you and also have a Q&A at the end. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to kick off our presentation.
Thanks, Angie. All right, so as part of our manufacturing series of webinars, we decided that we would do a webinar on utilizing the warehouse functionality. That seems to be a topic that comes up quite a bit. How much or how little of warehousing can we use within the manufacturing module? So to start, why don't we just give you a little background on ourselves in case you don't know who we are. My name is Jenny Hollingsworth. I'm a senior application consultant here at Inovia Consulting. I've been here for, I think, in a couple days, it'll be 16 years now. So been here for quite a while. About another 10 years prior to that, I was at another NAV partner. So all in all, been working with NAV for about 26 years, 26, 27 years now. So I have a good background in the software. I'll hand it over to John and he can introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is John Grant. I'm also a senior application consultant. Been here since 8 o'clock, but really for like 12 years, something like that. Past life, worked on several different ERP products, AX, which is another Microsoft product. Some of the other mid-market, Sideline, Made to Manage, Visual Manufacturing. And have had a chance to we look at how our customers who are production people, production focused, leveraging warehousing, because it's not quite a true distributor where you have all you do is bring in product and focus on managing it in the warehouse and moving it. When you have production, it's a little bit of what levels do you need to use of the NAV BC product to support what you need to do, because you're not truly I'll call it like a tier 1 warehouse type of requirements, and we'll go through the different levels. So looking forward to trying to tell you what we've seen other customers do and looking for questions. Any question is fair game. And if we don't know the answer, we'll make one up or find the answer for you.
Oh boy.
Isn't that what consultants do? I don't know.
All right, we'll find the answer. We won't make it up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our agenda today. First, we're going to look at the different levels or options of warehousing functionality you can use in production, from like simple setup to complex setups. Then we'll go through how to set those up, and we'll go through what warehouse processes can be utilized in production. So first, we have a few PowerPoint slides to go through and describe some of this information, and then at the end, we'll head into Business Central and show how it works. And like John said, if you have questions, please feel free to ask throughout, either in the question box or unmute yourselves and speak up. All right, so go ahead, John.
I was going to say, well, okay, so this kind of starts with what level of warehousing do you need to support what you're trying to do? And we're going to talk about, what in our customer base, we have some customers, they only use bins. They don't do any warehouse documents. They ship and invoice right off the sales order. They receive right on the purchase order, and they have bins. And bins, to just put a little how customers use them. A bin can be an area. It doesn't have to be, like an aisle, a rack, a row, a height on the bin, and the row, and all those super detail. It can be an area. And so when you think about, do I need warehousing for production, or how do I leverage production? A simple bin setup is an option, and we have had customers successfully use that. So they manage their inventory to the bin level. The second level that probably over half our customers use, if not 60, 80, 70%, something like that. They use bins with warehouse documents, meaning they don't want their warehouse people to be on a monitor or a handheld. You can go to a handheld, you know, that there's ISVs, they call them, that offer handheld, but on even a monitor out there, they don't want the warehouse people necessarily in the sales order or in the purchase order receiving or in the production order entering that kind of data. So there's a warehouse documents, mean we can have a production order pick. We can have a production order put away. You're utilizing bins and a document that they're using to post to the production order versus being in the production order and entering that kind of data. So because this is warehousing with production, I'm going to say if we turn on warehouse picks, which is a parameter, and we'll show you that, that means when certain items on a production order, I'm going to produce a warehouse pick that is either a paper document someone takes, or it's on a handheld, and it tells a stocker or someone to go get the material and move it to my machine or my floor bin for production, because I need to have it moved in order to do the work. So bins with warehouse documents are kind of the second level, what we'll call it. And then the third level, and we're focusing on production again, is directed pick and put away, which turns on zones. So now you're getting into more what I would call more of a formal warehouse setup. So I've got zones. My bins now have bin codes. So is this a pick put bin? Is this a receive bin only? Is this a there's bin codes to assign to bins. You can have bin priorities. Now in the production side, that's less, but in the put away side, that comes into play. But it might be for finished product where you put it away. And in the warehouse documents, again, we would still utilize a production warehouse pick and a production put away to say not only when I produce output, but where should I, the suggested bin to put it away to. So again, we tried to present the three different levels we see customers using. And once you have bin set up and a little bit of warehousing, the middle one, we see a lot of customers use. It gives you some of the warehouse, but it doesn't give you the complexity of maintaining zones and bins and cubage in a bin and bin priorities and those kind of things. So any questions out there for people that are using the bins with production? And that's what the focus of this session is. And we're going to go through some of those, show you an example of a pick and whatnot. So if you're working with someone early on here to determine what do you want to do, you need to talk about your current process. And I'm going to slant a little bit. You know, we're production. I'm a production person. Warehousing and bins is a secondary. You know what I mean is, I want to manage my production. I want to pick material. I want to put material away. I'm not necessarily trying to get efficiency in the warehouse. Okay. No questions?
All right, so let's look at some of the setups of warehousing specifically for production. So maybe, John, you could talk a little bit about bins and what the three types of bins are.
Okay, so again, if you're getting into bins and how do I set up my bins? So obviously you develop a bin code, and to what extent you have bins determines, like I mentioned, you could have an area be a bin, you could have a rack be a bin. How finite you get depends on your needs. So again, in the end, you will have an item in a bin, right? But when you set up your bins, there's a couple of flags that help determine how that bin is used. Again, this is not bin type or the advanced warehousing direct put away. This is basic bin setup. So default bin. This is the first time when you receive, let's say you're starting up and you have you're just putting in beginning inventory, it's going to create that bin as the default. But you can unmark it if that's not the default. You'll see the default show up at different points. Probably the one I see in production is my output. When I produce output, I don't want the default bin to be where it's stored. I want that to be, maybe it's the floor bin that it's sitting at and somebody's got to put it away. And you'll see that in a production order header. When you build a production order, there's a bin on that item line. You might have to expose it, but that bin is where the output's going to go. And that's typically it's a floor bin by the machine, and then a stocker or someone will come through and the forklift pick it up and create, put it away either in a what they call just a movement, ad hoc movement, or reclass. I guess if you're familiar with the reclass journal, it says I'm taking it from a production floor bin where it's sitting by the machine and I'm putting it to where it goes. So the default sometimes recommends the wrong bin for production, and you just have to work on that and get that straightened out. Fixed bin, items are assigned a fixed bin. Basically, it's not going to go away when it gets down to zero. The system in the background has if it's not a fixed bin and the quantity gets to zero, that bin will drop off for that item. For those of you running bins, you see that, and that's also why every once in a while we see a customer who comes to us. They have an item, and when I look at the bin, it has 50 bins assigned to it, and 90% of them are empty, but they've got it marked as fixed, so it never disappears. And that gets in the way of, you're trying to write a jet report or you're trying to do something to analyze, and you got all these bins on this item with no inventory. That's because it's marked fixed. Dedicated is a key field. And we'll talk about one thing we found with the latest release also. This is without running directed put away, which is the advanced warehousing. I have bins that I don't want my picks when I create a warehouse, either a production pick or a more in the sales pick. I don't want the system to tell me to pick from, right? So you can say it's dedicated, so the system will skip that. In other words, I'm going to say that if you have floor bins by machines for output, you'd mark those as dedicated because I don't want the pickers to be sent to that machine trying to take some of that inventory. So it's a simple way to make sure when you create a sales pick that it doesn't go out to the, send somebody out to the floor to do that. So those three fields help activity on. So again, the default bin will show up when you enter in production. When you enter the output, it'll want to put it in the default bin. And 9 times out of 10, my default bin for sub-assemblies or finished product, when I loaded inventory, isn't the bin I want my output to go to when I run a production order. But it will do that if it's marked default. Fixed is used for, do I also want to leave this bin out there even if it gets down to zero? If I don't, if where you store things is I put it here for now, but I move it when it's moved, something else might go there, then you don't want it to mark fixed because you want the system when it gets down to 0 to take it off of that item. It doesn't delete the bin, it just takes it off for that item. In this example, if the first top item, the quantity gets down to 0 in that bin, 540-in, it would remove it. Now that's a dedicated bin also, and you see down on the bottom there's some production floor bins, and we'll go through those. So those three types help manage the bins. If you know, I'd recommend you get familiar with how that works, and it works pretty well.
All right. So then what about the default bin setup on locations? How does that work?
Okay, so we have the system wants to know some of these defaults that end up on components. For instance, when I build a production order, I've got a bill of material, and based on a couple things, and we'll go through that, it will say I'm going to move it to this one. Let's say to production bin. Let's say it's a normal item. It's the bin on the bill of material on the production order when you create it will be prod in. So if I looked at that bin on the production order bill of material, it would say prod in. And when it creates a warehouse pick for the production order, it's going to take it from bin A100 and move it to prod in, because that's where it's going to consume it from. I need to get material from the warehouse rack to the floor, and prod in the to production bin is the simplest one to talk to. There are some parameters when it's used and when it's not used, but think of it, that's where I want it to go. And in this case, prod in is generic bin. It's not machine specific or work center specific, but we'll go through if you need to do that also, how you do that. And that it's pretty straightforward. The from production bin is also where output is posted to. So when I post output, it's going to use this bin to post output to. So I could see I have out. It's a virtual bin, obviously, but it would be a bin that it exists for a while there, and when the stocker puts it away, he says I'm doing a reclass or ad hoc movement, moving it from prod out to bin ABC. The open shop floor bin, which this one is not populated, think of it as it's material I store out on the shop floor or by a machine. It might be replenished with a Kanban simple, where the operator out there, when it gets, either there's a visual signal to say, when I get down to this far in the bin, I want a stocker to come and bring me another pallet, those kind of things. So you can have material that you don't pick necessarily. It's stored out on the shop floor line, and you manage it that way. And Kanban is a good example of that. If I have fasteners or things by an assembly area, I don't really still have a stocker go get me 63 fasteners for this production order. It's probably replenished with cartons or a box of 500 or some darn thing, and that's a Kanban kind of a approach. So we do. This is one area where open software bin could be thought of as a Kanban item. It's stored out there, and we replenish it not with a pick, but with a some other way. So these are stored on the location record. They're also stored on the warehouse setup, but we usually set it up on the location because that makes more sense. Because we typically, if we have multiple locations, we do it there. And then this next slide talks about where else can we store it. So if you look at work centers and machines, which is part of production, those are used in routings, they also contain those same fields. And these are used if in your production, you want to have a warehouse pick move material to a particular machine versus a generic area. For instance, you might have, we're working with a food processor. They call it a hot kitchen, right? That's where they need material staged there. So on their route, so the work center is like 500, but it represents like an area. We fill in these fields on the bottom so that when if a pick is created, it's going to move it to the to production bin is the mix in bin versus the prod in bin, because we want it to a specific machine or work center. These are available both on the this is a work center view, but you can also have it on the machines. If you had I don't know, let's say you had 5 CNC machines on the floor, and they take up a lot of space, and you have jobs going to each one of those, you might want materials staged at that machine level versus just in a generic area. So that's another, this will override the location that we just saw. So if I have a production order that has this work center referenced, and I have material linked to that work center, it will tell me to move it from rack A100 to mixer in bin. And that's really what the transaction would be versus a generic production bin. So that, depending on your process, will help you stage the material in the right machine or work center. So it's pretty straightforward, but it's just how the tree of how it knows what to do. Looks at location first. If those are populated, that's what it will use. But if you have the machine and you've linked material to an operation through the routing link code, if you're familiar with that, then it will use these codes here on that warehouse pick to say, where do I move this material to, or where do I consume it from? So when I look at the bill of material for an item that has material linked to this mixer, I would see the components are either being consumed from mixer in or mixer open. So depending on how I set it up, there's some floor bin components, but then there's actual components that we move from the back to the machine. Any questions on that? Okay, good there, I think.
All right, so we looked at bin setup and how to set up default bins, but what about the document setup? What can we do there?
Okay, so now we're into, I've got my bin set up, and I'm got in my mind how we're going to move material around. Now I've got to enable some of those things. So in the setup here, this is again on the location record where we stored those default bins. We also can turn on, because we're running warehousing, and we don't want, if I do require receive, that first one in the warehouse section, this affects the receiving of the material. They're not, and basically what it does, it separates the warehouse activity from the purchase order. If you don't have this marked, then you're updating the PO directly, and the larger you get it, the more complex you want your warehouse people working on their own document. And the one we're interested in is the require pick. That's a key one. Now we want this require pick enables warehouse shipments to create picks. It requires you to create a pick off of a warehouse shipment on the sales side, but we're talking about production, so it requires us, for when the item has to be picked or moved, to create a production pick. So in other words, you will get messages if you haven't processed the pick. There's items on there that should have been picked and they weren't. You can't just move the material to the machine without processing through the pick. Bin mandatory makes sense if you're obviously, if you start using bins, you got to turn that on. You can't use bins without that marked. And the other have more to do with the sales side, which is a different topic, but And in this case, we don't have a directed put away turned on, which is the top level of warehousing with zones, bin types, those kind of what I would call, if you have a warehouse need to do all those kind of things, but a lot of the people working with production, they're not to that level. You know, they have inventory and they need to pick it and pull it and move it to a bin. They're not into the directed put away and those kind of things. But it separates, like it says, separates the warehouse tasks from having to have users in a PO or on a production order entering that kind of data. So not complex, but just how that relates to using bins. The other item is flushing method, which comes into play when we create these picks. What's on a production pick and what is not, right? So flushing method, the ones that will be on a warehouse pick would be if it's pick backward or pick forward, obvious, and manual. So if I have a series of bill of material items and the flushing method is set to manual, it will appear on my pick, warehouse pick. So you get questions about, what about the Kanban items, right? The ones we store out there that are in the floor bin. If I have that set up as backward, not pick backward, or forward, it will use the floor bin on the component on the production order where to consume it from. Okay, so the flushing method impacts what shows up on your production pick, and so it's important to understand how that fits together. Let's see what else on that. We're not necessarily going through, unless we want us to. We probably could take a minute. Is everybody familiar with the flushing methods? Any questions on when I say backward or forward? Does that make sense? Hopefully.
How about a show of hands? You can raise your hand.
I can't see hands.
Yeah, you can.
I know.
We do have a question, though.
Oh, what are the pros and cons of forward or backward flushing?
Okay. I'm going to describe where I see customers use. Forward flushing, a great use is I have a recipe. So let's say I make food or a blend or some darn, probably food is a great one. I have to make a 100 pounds of a recipe. I have components that make 100 pounds, but the output we get is never exactly 100 pounds. It could be 98, it could be 95, because we lose some of our formula that we mix together in the process. It's in the pipe, it's in the vessel yet. I never get, if I put 100 in, I don't get 100 out. And that would be a great example of when I put my ingredients in, I'm going to forward flush because I want it to be automatic, and I put in 100 pounds. I'm not basing how much I consumed on what it yielded. Now, I had one example where we put in 100 pounds and the output was 104 pounds. And that was interesting. It was a customer who dyed fiber, and it got wet and it weighed whatever, they gained some weight. But we never based what we consumed on the output. It was what we put into it. So think of that as formulas, recipes, would be a good candidate for forward flushing. Backward flushing is the opposite of that. I say when I post 10 of 100 piece run, I want to consume components, that enough components for those 10. So it consumes as you report output. It's a great tool. Think about a month end, this WIP number you need to provide to financials at month end. You want to know what components have we used that go into WIP versus still on hand. So backward is great. Of course, when you get into, if you're serial or lot tracking, then you have to record lot, but we won't get too complicated. But think of backward based on, I've set this component, it's backward flushed. When I post one output, I want to consume one of these or 4 of these bolts or whatever it was based on posting output. So it consumes the components right away as you post output. A little bit oversimplification, but that's the concept. Manual, of course, is I post 10 output. I have no components posted yet. I got 10 output because I'm waiting to manually consume the components. So hopefully that gives you a feel for forward, backward. Forward, think recipes, formulas, where the output is never one-to-one. Put 100 pounds in doesn't mean I get that amount out. And then backward, it's usually a one-to-one.
So a secondary question, and then we'll probably have to move forward. If you release a production order with forward flushing, but then have a modification mid-production, is there a reversing entry needed?
Yeah, it depends when you consume the forward material. Now, when I release a production order, if I'm not using the routing link code, think of that as I haven't attached those components to any route step, and I release it, it will consume all the material right away, even though I haven't started on it. I might be scheduling, releasing it, I'm not going to run it till Friday, but it will consume the material. So I'd recommend you could leave it forward flushed, but attach those items to the first operation, for instance. And then when you release the production order, nothing will happen. But then when you start that first operation, all you have to do is say 1 minute or something, it'll consume all the material. Now, if through the process you didn't use all of it, you can go into the consumption journal and reverse a little bit. You know, like I thought I was going to use 50, but I only used 49. You can put a -1 in to reduce what you used. So it's just a process again of, try and get to 80%, and then maybe the other 20 is a process to reverse it, or the one I see more is I forward flush to we have a customer who does clay. They make clay, so they've got a vessel. They fill it, issue all the material. No output reported yet, but right at the end, the quality will come and check it. And they'll go, well, the color needs a little more, right? So they will add a little more color, for instance. Well, then we do enter that, additional, to get that additional cost in that production order, and we haven't even posted any output yet. So again, you're trying to capture all your costs, and sometimes you didn't use it, or sometimes you use a little more in your QA process, because in the end, all you're trying to do is when you finish that production order, show me how we did. Here's what we planned. Here's how we ran it. That's the key to understanding if you have to adjust your bill of material or your routing steps to get accurate cost.
Right, we have to move forward, or we won't make it through. So I'm moving on to the next slide. This slide is just really showing the routing link code that can be used with that flushing method. So if you want to just quickly talk about that routing link code,
yeah,
John.
This is what I was talking about. We're assigning components to route steps. Let's think of it that way. And that's using a routing link code.
And we'll show some examples of that when we're in Business Central. All right, so let's, we went through warehouse setups. Now let's look at the pick options for production. Okay, so the first option we'll go through is inventory pick, and then the next slide is on the warehouse pick. So maybe you could describe when you use each.
Correct. If you're not using the you saw in the parameters there was a pick on a location record to mandatory pick. If you're not using that, you can use inventory pick off of the production order. When it registers, it consumes the material. That's the one thing it does. In my mind, I don't have a lot of customers doing it this way because once you turn on bins, the warehouse side makes a little more sense to timing and everything. But if you're using bins without warehousing, you can create a pick, go get this material. As soon as they post it or register it, it removes it from inventory. So it's a way to have a pick without a little more formal process.
Right, so this does the 2-in-1, right? It picks it and it consumes it immediately.
Consumes it. Right.
Whereas if we look at the next slide on the warehouse pick, which is what most end up using, when you do your pick document, it's just going to pick that component to whatever the bin code is on production order components. And then you actually do have to do the consumption of the components in a separate process, either through flushing, right, or manual.
Right, and again, it's on this list is going to be manual, pick backward, pick forward items.
All right, so those are the 2 pick documents. What about the output options? What can we do with output? The first option is item reclassification, which I'll let you talk about.
Yeah, this is simply when I move that output from the floor bin that I just do a reclass journal to say I'm taking it from prod out, for instance, and moving it to the bin. There really is no ledger activity. It's just a movement. And as you want to automate more things, obviously handheld helps with that. So this is one vendor that we've had good success with, InsightWorks. They have something called an ad hoc movement, which is really a reclass. So I'm on a handheld, I scan the bin, scan the item, and enter the quantity, and then go over and put it away. And Lanham's Ace Warehousing also has some of that functionality too. So there's several out there. The biggest difference is some look, act, and feel like BC NAV. I mean, they're embedded inside of it. Some of the other solutions are external. It's an external warehouse, and there's more integration, pushing data back and forth. And those, yeah, if you have a need for that, that's a solution. But a lot of the manufacturing customers just having ability to add a handheld, these 2 solutions seem to be fit the bill. And then the put away is just that. You can choose to do this or not do this. It just creates a record for the stocker or whoever is responsible to put inventory away. It gives them a document and tells them where to go grab the in, and they record where they put it. If you have handhelds out there, I would, definitely you would do something like this. But you don't have to do a put away. You can just move it and record that also.
All right, so then let's just we'll talk about item tracking for a little bit and what you can do with that in production.
So obviously, so when you're consuming the raw materials, if it's lot track or serial track, you're going to have to record that number. So if you have a warehouse pick and I fill it and I say I'm taking this item, this lot number, it's reserved for that production order, so you don't have to fill it in. When I post output, it knows what lot number to take. If I just move an item and a lot number to an area and don't use the warehouse pick, like an inventory movement, well, that won't consume it. But if I just move it, I still have to fill that in on the individual production orders to understand what bin. We have a food processor who we stage material for like a shift. So, and it's pulled in like 25-pound bags instead of 17.2 pounds. So we don't know which lot is going to be used on which order because they're making 10 orders in that work center today. We don't know what order they're going to do it. That the people there are going to run it the way they want to. They record which lot number for the consumption side of it, but that is necessary to fill in if you are recording that. You can't ignore that. So just be aware the warehouse pick helps with that. So it knows already what lot number you picked, and that's what it'll use when you post. You don't have to fill it in.
All right, so let's move over to Business Central and let's look at how some of this works on a production order. So let me go ahead. John, can you see Business Central?
Yes, yep, we're
okay.
Good.
All right. Okay, so let's go to a release production order. And I have one set up here for chocolate M&Ms. We want 50 boxes of 40 packages due on November 1st. I have my location, Indiana, set up. And you'll notice my bin code on the production header auto-populated with prod out. That came from my location code, Indiana. So that's where that came from. If I go look at my components, maybe we'll just talk about the components and the routing on this production order. We have ingredients here. Those are all attached to the routing link code of Mixer. So if we go over to the routing in a minute, whatever route operation step is also a Mixer. That's which operation step these are attached to. And we have them set up as pick plus backward as the flushing method. So on these items, we do need to create a pick. And that pick, when we register it, will go into this Mixer in bin to be consumed from there. Down below here, we do have packaging. We have wrappers, labels, and cartons. The wrapper is going into a separate bin code, and then the label and the carton go into prod open, which I know the setups, so I know that these two came from the location code. Mixer in and 540 in came from the work center. So I don't know, John, if you want to talk about why you maybe would assign that to a work center?
Yeah, each customer is a little bit different, but basically what you're looking at here is some of the items we're going to pick. Some are going to be floor stock, like the bottom two items. And then some have a unique bin that we're going to pull it from. And again, when you look at your operation, a lot of times, if you have sub-assemblies, the first operation is a sub-assembly and it creates something. You probably don't necessarily go pick that. You just consume it from an area. So the next production order up the line, when I look at this component, it's a component that we issue from that quote unquote output bin. So it's a setup, it's a process, it's looking at your flow, trying to eliminate busy work and activities. So again, do I pick it? Not a problem. Is it floor stock? Yep, we can set it up. Do I consume it from another? Is it a sub assembly that we consume from another bin? You can also do that. So it's a little bit of just looking at what you're doing and fitting the puzzle together a little bit to support. So you end up at the end, you've got this view of where I'm going to consume material from.
And then you can see over on the right here, quantity picked. We have nothing picked yet. We have not created that pick. But once we register that, those will populate here. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's create the warehouse pick. So I'm going to go to Actions, Warehouse, Create Pick. If I go under Related Order, we'll go to Pick Lines and show that document. Oh, sorry, we showed the production order. We want to see the warehouse pick. Here we go. All right, so you notice that it brought in all of the components, the take bin, what bin it's going to come from, and we're placing it into the bin that is listed on the production order components page. Anything here, John, that you want to?
Well, those two. If you notice, the last two items in the component list were backward flushed. They are not listed because we're pulling it from the floor bin. Then those two items.
Right. So we don't have to pick those. Okay. So what
Questions on that? I mean, it's a key concept to build this pick and set your data up. So some items you pick, some you don't. And where do you get it from? That whole concept.
What about, John, what happens if there is not quantity available for a component?
Yeah, and I'm gonna, this is more, to me, is more in the planner role. Production orders start out as firm planned, right? And they're, you know, we know we're gonna run it. Today is Wednesday, I'm gonna look at Friday's schedule. I'm probably running a material shortage on firm planned orders to understand, can I release this to the floor? I don't want to be surprised on Friday that we don't have material. So I'm running a material shortage in order to understand, is it okay to release this production order and get it on the floor for Friday? Because maybe I'm short something, but hey, there's a PO coming in on Friday or Thursday, so I'm good to go. And what I'm getting at is you should find out you don't have material when I've got a released order creating the pick. Well, it won't show up here because only items that you can go get obviously show up here. So you could be short some material here. So let's say that one of these items, I don't know, you know, we only have 100 on a shelf instead of 200. It will put it on this document to pick 100. But the shortage report is a key document for the planner to try and figure out, is this order good to go on when I'm going to schedule it? But yeah, this pick will only pick what's available. It won't send somebody out to get 200 and we only have 100 in that bin.
And this is just, you know, a way to create the pick right from the production order. If you want to create many production order picks at once, you can certainly go ahead and use the pick worksheet as well. So I'm going to go ahead and register the pick. So if we were to go back and look at the line components now, here you could see it's registered the pick quantity on the line components as well.
And if you look at bin contents also for any of these items on that, you can see you now have some in that bin that didn't have any anymore.
Yeah, here you can see that 37.5 got moved from A1 to mixer in.
And if you notice, it's dedicated, meaning I don't want to pick to take that 37.5, so I make it dedicated.
All right, there's a question. Is there a built-in material shortage report?
There is. It's right. Yeah, it's right on one of these. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at your release production order list and you go to the reports menu, it's right here, production order shortage list.
You could run it, Jenny, and you know, I don't think anything will show up, but if there was something, it would tell you. Okay, so there are some issues potentially.
Yeah, this is with my Lifesaver production order. So.
Now it'll show you if there's any quantity on purchase orders, quantity on sales orders. It doesn't necessarily, what the planner runs is this, and then the next thing you might do is look at item availability by event. I don't know if you guys run that, but that's a great report. It's like a pegging report, shows beginning inventory, PO, sales orders, production orders, the ins and outs in a numerical date sequence. So as a planner, if this is a hot order, I've got to understand what's trying to take my inventory prior to my due date if this is a customer, but that's all a process.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and just do go ahead and go to the production journal and do the output entry. Let me just put some runtime in to pretend that we actually did do this. And the output of the 50 is going to go to the prod out bin. So let's go ahead and post. And then John had mentioned a few of the different put away options are, since it is sitting in prod out, you could use the item reclass journal and just do a movement from one bin to another. If you're using InsightWorks or an ACE warehousing, you could use the handhelds and do an ad hoc movement. Third option is you can actually create a put away document from the release production order as well. In order to do that, I would need to create the inbound warehouse request and then go ahead and create the inventory put away. So I'd select the put away option, click OK, and then of course there's nothing to create. Just make sure. Output 50. Just looking at bin contents for that item. Oh, I have a unit of measure issue going on here.
Okay, and just one comment on this put away. A lot of, and you'll see companies that are on the lean journey, for instance, they might have a marked off area on the floor. Anything there gets put away. That's kind of just a on the fly put away. That works fine too, versus an official document on a handheld. Sometimes that's easier.
Yeah, so normally if I wouldn't have my unit of measure issue here, that's what we would do. You would create the inventory put away, and then from the put away document, you would tell it which bin you're putting it away to and then posting that put away. Any questions?
Jenny?
Yes.
One question did come through. I'm not sure if it was addressed. Oh, yes, it was. Never mind. I think we're all caught up.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If you do think of any other questions, or you have more comments or questions, anything else to ask, please feel free to contact John. He'd be happy to answer them. No, you can contact me as well, but John would be your best bet for answering anything to do with production. And I'll pass it back to Angie.
All right, well, thank you both for the presentation, and thank you all for attending. And if you're watching this on demand, we thank you for taking the time out to join us. I also wanted to let you know we have another webinar coming up tomorrow from one of our development consultants, Rick Faulkner, and he's going to be presenting on Introduction to Developing Enums in Business Central. So you can check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's inovia.com/events. And we also have some new training workshops for you and your team members to attend. Be sure to visit our training workshop page at inovia.com/workshops for more information and to register for the training workshop that fits your role. And don't forget our Inovia Conversation podcast. Our hosts, Steve Waltz and Jeff Pergolski, have a library of podcasts for you to listen to, so you can find out more about those podcasts at inovia.com/podcast, and you can subscribe so you can get notified when those new episodes air. And for those of you attending Dynamics Con in Anaheim, California next month, be sure to stop by the Inovia room and talk to our team. And you can check out our conference page for all of our other conferences, and that's inovia.com/conferences to learn about those and to register for our upcoming customer conference in May 2022. All right, well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, John and Jenny, for presenting.
One comment, and also if you have a topic that you think would make what you'd like to see a webinar on, let us know. You know, we might not do it, but let us know.
Thanks, John. All right, thanks again, everyone, and take care.